Muchas gracias. The title of this presentation is The Semi-Spontaneous Production of DOM in Romanian and Spanish among Romanian-speaking L2 speakers of Spanish. I'm mostly interested in bidirectional cross-linguistic influence, so how Spanish influences Romanian and how Romanian influences Spanish in this bilingual population. This is just a follow-up on previous studies. It's basically the same data collection process with the same group of bilingual people. So it's just more data on the same participants, the same speakers. So basically, we're going to give a background on DOM in Romanian and Spanish, although, I mean, we have learned already a lot about it today, a motivation for the study. We're going to talk about the study, methods, participants, results, and the discussion. And finally, we're going to provide a conclusion.
So I will be talking a bit about DOM in Romanian. So the Spanish-Romanian language pair presents differential object marking systems with similarities and differences. So DOM in Romanian is marked by pe and sometimes clitics, and in Spanish is sensitive to the animacy features of the object as well as to the referential stability in Romanian. So an example of a grammatical use of DOM in Romanian is băiatul a pedepsit-o pe broasca cea mare, so the boy has punished. Clitic, then you see pe, the marker pe, and then the big frog. So the boy punished the big frog. So here is a grammatical typical example where you have pe and then also the clitic. And yeah, this is sensitive to animacy and referential stability. So in Romanian, there is sensitivity to a referential stability scale, according to which we see a hierarchy between among proper nouns, definite pronouns, followed by definite DPs and partitives, and then indefinite DPs. So animacy and referential stability combine, and they give rise to multiple constraints or preferences, such that DOM is obligatory with proper names and definite pronouns, and it is optional with animate definite DPs, partitives and indefinite DPs, and generally not allowed with inanimate definite DPs, partitives, and indefinite DPs. So basically, the more stable, referentially stable an element is, the more DOM is obligatory. But also animacy plays an important part in this role. Thank you. And then let's see. Yeah.
In Spanish, on the other hand, animacy plays the most important role. If it's animate, it's very likely going to be marked. And definite as well, but not to the same degree. So an example here from our results, muerde al otro sapo. In this case, it's marked, otro sapo being both animate and definite. This is 1C is not an example from our data because those area in conflicto, as Alicia said, are not as easy to find, you know. Those are very discussed in the literature sometimes, but not as frequent when we happen to collect data with an interview. So yeah. And these are some similarities. So for example, with regard to animacy, both Romanian and Spanish do not mark inanimate DPs. And these are other differences, mostly when it comes to clitic doubling. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Referential stability is a difference. So for example, when it comes to proper nouns or demonstrative pronouns, those are marked more in Romanian than in Spanish. And also the fact that clitic doubling rarely plays a role in Spanish, at least in European Spanish, whereas it does in Romanian. Finally, animate definite DPs receive DOM optionally in Romanian, but they do so obligatorily in Spanish. So a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences. So what is our motivation? Again, to explore bidirectional cross-linguistic influence. So in order to do that, we're going to see if there are differences between the bilingual group and the baseline monolingual group in Romania. They are not purely monolinguals because I mean they also speak English, but it's the most monolingual we could find. Also somewhat similar in age, and then with differences in Spanish with regard to Spanish monolingual. The Spaniards were pretty much monolingual. In Spain, in the same community where they lived, Sevilla, which is where I'm from. We hypothesize that yeah, they're going to be some sort of bidirectional cross-linguistic influence, so they're going to be different from both groups, as analyzed in my previous studies. So in my previous studies, I found that their receptive grammatical knowledge of Spanish was different from that from monolinguals in Spain, but their receptive grammatical knowledge, acceptability knowledge of Romanian DOM was not different from that of dominant speakers in Romania. However, with regard to production, their production was different from on both sides. So particularly with demonstrative pronoun direct object. A esta, esa, which in Spanish is only ruled by animacy, but in Romanian they are categorically marked because they fall quite high in the referential stability scale. So their production was that of a dominant person in Romanian, that is a Bleotu speaker of Spanish, but there were signs of attrition in their production, which is usually the pattern. So for methods, we used a background questionnaire, we used the LeapQ, and we also used the Mint, which is not designed for Romanian, but it was the best that I could find in order to gather information not only on proficiency, but also on dominance. And in addition to the elicited production task and the acceptability judgment task, which they completed in both languages. I mean, the bilinguals did, the monolinguals only completed them in their languages. Everyone also completed a narrative task. The narrative task is a frog story, which is consistent with what previous authors have done recently, although they did it with children and we did it with grown-ups. But I mean, we'll come back to this because it's a limitation. So these are some items from the Mint. The Mint is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's a picture naming task. It's completely production. It's not recognition. Basically, participants are shown a total of 68 pictures. They're all black and white, and they need to name those pictures in the language that they're asked. They can receive two hints. They can receive a phonological hint, which is basically the very first sound with which the word starts. And they can also receive like a semantic cue in case that the picture is not clear enough. You can provide them with a definition so they know what the picture shows. So these are, the pictures are ranked in order of frequency, so in order of difficulty. So these are some examples of items throughout the task. So it starts with easier words, árbol, corbata, then it goes a little bit more complicated with caracol, then recogedor, and then it finishes with pretty rare / difficult words like yunque.
And these in Romanian would be copac, cravato, melc, făraș și nicovală. Yeah, and nicovală.
Nicovală, like, how rare is that? But
very
I mean,
rare, very rare. Extremely rare.
Yeah, so it was complicated. It was really difficult for these speakers. The thing, though, is that they did pretty good. Of course, I think that in average they had spent over 9 years in Spain. So a lot of them, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, but some of them might have experienced a dominance shift. Some of them might be dominant in Spanish and not in Romanian anymore. So this is the narrative task. They saw this frog story. In this case, it's one frog too many. I have pictures here of the story if you guys are interested, but basically it's a whole bunch of animals, mostly frogs, playing around and going in adventures in the forest, etc. That's important. We'll go back to that. So a total of 58 subjects participated in this study, only 18 bilinguals. Yeah, they had spent 9.6 years in Spain, and they had an age of arrival range from 15 to 37. 17 Spanish native speakers residing in Spain in the same region, and then 23 Romanian monolingual, semi-monolingual native speakers living in Romania. So with regard to their results, yeah, the Romanian results were higher in the bilingual population, but not by much. And okay, so what did we do with our data? So with our data, with a 58 narratives, actually more, because the bilinguals completed them twice, once in Spanish and once in Romanian, we coded them for transitive strategies. So basically how they expressed direct objects with transitive verbs, of course, and with animate or human, mostly animate, but non-human objects. So what do we see here? We gathered a total of 335 cases. Most of them were clitics. We also see a difference in clitic doubling and object marker, which was more frequent in the monolingual group than in the bilingual group. And well, in total, we had fewer cases of transitive strategies in the bilinguals than in the monolingual Romanians. So these are some examples of these transitive strategies, which are specifically DOM used in Romanian by the bilinguals.
Cases of ungrammatical use of DOM in Romanian by the bilinguals are things like pe object without accusative clitic doubling, and also things like broscuța cea mare mușcă pe cea mică. So here you can see the DOM marked with pe, but you cannot see the clitic. And there are other examples as well. What is interesting is that the pe without the accusative clitic structure may not be ungrammatical to all speakers. So according to Avram, Mardale, and Soare, 2022, in contemporary Romanian, there are conservative speakers who allow both pe and the accusative clitic, and pe without the accusative clitic. So they allow both variants, with the clitic and without the clitic. But innovative speakers only allow pe and the accusative clitic. So there is a difference there between conservative and innovative speakers. Another strategy that is also in this way, in the sense, pe object without accusative clitic would only be ungrammatical in one variety, but not in all varieties of Romanian. As far as clitic doubling but no pe is concerned, this is ungrammatical throughout the whole, in all varieties. So we have an example here, broasca cea mare o privea un pic suspectă broscuța mică. So here we are basically lacking the pe marker, and we are also lacking, I mean, we have the clitic, but we are lacking the pe marker. The big frog was looking a little bit suspicious, the small froggy. So it's ungrammatical. And then gender mismatch is another thing. So here you could potentially have, a grammatical structure, but what is ungrammatical about it is the fact that it lacks gender agreement. So when referring back to the noun, the gender is mismatched. So you have things like look at the small one, but the one is marked with masculine, for instance, and before it was a feminine noun. So because of this mismatch, the DOM ends up being ungrammatical. And there were quite a few of such uses where you could see ungrammaticality.
So when comparing the strategies between in the Romanian language, between the Romanian bilinguals and the Romanian monolinguals, we find that the two groups present differences in their distribution of strategies. Basically, of course, across strategies, they're all different, but across group, they're also all different. I mean, I understand it's not enough data, and maybe this analysis doesn't have that power, but I mean, I still forced it and did it. But yeah, we find differences between these two groups in terms of how they use their strategies. And basically what we see is that they may be avoiding the use of bilinguals may be avoiding the use of DOM due to syntactic complexity. With regard to Spanish, it's a completely different story. Because pretty much they're very Spanish-like when it comes to narrating the story in Spanish. We don't see a big differences here in the plot, not a lot of differences in the distribution if we look at the percentages, given that, I mean, it's not the same final amount of instances. And when we go to the multinomial regression, yeah, there are differences between the strategies, but not between the groups. So basically the groups, this group of L2 speakers of Spanish do not present differences in their transitive strategies with regard to the Spanish monolinguals that they interact with in their communities. And when we look at, bilinguals, at only the bilinguals, and compare their strategies in their two languages, their use of clitics is similar across both languages, but their use of DOM is different. And so it seems that these, again, bilingual speakers may be avoiding DOM in Romanian, but not so in Spanish, at least with, in comparison with the two monolingual groups that they're compared with. And yeah, so they use more DOM in Spanish and not as much in Romanian. And of course, I mean, in Romanian, the scales, it's not only animacy, but also referential stability that makes it more complicated. The clitic doubling is also an added difficulty in terms of syntactic complexity, whereas in Spanish, it's pretty much animate versus non-animate, and it's only one morphological marker. And then we also explored some variables that may account for this variability within the bilingual group. So we conducted an analysis that explored the production of P versus non-P, and their language dominance, which is basically their Spanish mean results minus their Romanian mean results. And it found that the bilinguals who scored higher in the Romanian mean than in the Spanish mean produced more instances of P. So those that have a higher, deeper, productive vocabulary knowledge of Romanian as opposed to Spanish seem to be producing more instances of this syntactically complex P marker. We also found results with regard to age. So consistently with the results from Avram et al. From 2002, who, I mean, they discuss the difference between innovative and conservative bilingual speakers in Romanian with regard to this clitic doubling. We found that consistent results, basically, as their age increases, they use fewer clitic doubling. And yeah, that is what it is, right? Like, I'm in trouble. Good. Yeah. So yeah, the more conservative speakers are the older participants, as opposed to the younger participants who use clitic doubling across the board. So going back to our research questions, our motivation was to explore bidirectional cross-linguistic influence, and we had two questions. Basically, one focused on Romanian, and we found that their semi-spontaneous production of transitive strategies, which include DOM, are different between the Romanian bilinguals and the Romanian monolinguals in Romanian, but that is not the case with Spanish. This group of Romanian Spanish bilinguals do not present a difference in their transitive strategies in semi-spontaneous production with Spanish monolinguals. So there are no signs of bidirectional cross-linguistic influence. Instead, there may be signs of L1 attrition and end-state L2 acquisition. With regard to these very same participants who completed also elicited production tasks and acceptability judgment tasks, in the elicited production task and the acceptability judgment task, which is the 2020 paper, there were differences in Spanish, but not in Romanian. Their Romanian was still native-like, and but differences were found in both languages in their production, particularly because the use of DOM with demonstrative pronoun direct object was targeted. Okay, so can we speak of L1 attrition if their meta representation is not affected, but only their production? I mean, these L2 speakers are avoiding the production of certain transitive strategies, mostly DOM in their L1 due to syntactic complexity, but their mental representation is intact as measured by the AJT. So we cannot determine it is L1 attrition. Maybe if we have this maximalist view of attrition in which any sign of attrition is attrition, you know, if we have a maximalist view in which we consider that maybe lexical retrieval difficulties is also a sign of attrition, yeah, then it is attrition. But they can still access the features and definitely their L1 DOM as measured by the AJT. So I do not think it is attrition. On the other hand, can we speak of end-state L2 acquisition if their production is not different from monolinguals, yet their acceptability is? Well, their production differences mostly stemmed from direct objects featuring demonstrative pronouns, esta, esa. There was an overextension of those. So in cases like a María no le gustó, o a María no, ¿cómo era? María no ha visto esa película, pero ha visto a esa. María nunca tomó esa fotografía, pero tomó a esa. De ese estilo. So yeah, so in that case, there was overextension of DOM in Spanish. in the narrative, there was not an instance of demonstrative pronoun direct object. So there was avoidance, so it's hard to determine whether that would have happened in the narrative. So as a conclusion, these results indicate that the semi-spontaneous production of transitive strategies in this group of bilingual shows signs of L1 attrition and of end-state acquisition of their L2. Not completely attrition, but some signs of early attrition maybe. And their L2 is native-like only in production, and in some cases not completely when we look at the AJT in the other paper. So however, when combining these results with previous studies analyzing additional data from these same participants, we observe that the sign of L1 attrition may be limited to DOM avoidance in production. On the other hand, the end-state acquisition of their L2 presents a more obscure picture. Their acceptability is not native-like yet, their semi-spontaneous production is. This is thanks to avoidance strategies. When these participants narrate stories or they may interact with other people, their production may be completely native-like, and only when we target specific structures in very structured tasks, we may find differences. And we found a few limitations, mostly the frog story, which is mostly about frogs. So we didn't really have human characters, and we find only very, very few inanimate objects. Most of them were animate, but not human. So basically, animals, because it was a story about animals. So that is a limitation. Interesting to see though that in Spanish they all behaved very similar. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for your comments and questions, hopefully. I have the frog story here if you guys are interested, and I'm willing to share the presentation or anything you may be interested in. Thank you. Gracias.